What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. I'm Emery Cuzzy. I'm sitting here with Cameron Selby, and we're going to be doing the Thanksgiving special for this NFL slate, 3-game slate. A lot of games that, are kind of actually going to be a little underperforming based on, matchup, because we do have the Giants and the Cowboys on slate. Both of their starting quarterbacks to start the year are not playing on this slate, but we have some other games that are going to be more important, more telling on, some of the NFC North is in this on this slate a lot. There's three teams from there. The Bears are playing the Lions. The Dolphins are at the Packers. Should be a fun slate, though.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I mean, Detroit and Chicago is a huge spread, but last year was a huge spread between the Packers and the Lions, and we saw what happened initially going up 3 possessions in the first quarter and just completely flipping the slate on its head. Dallas and the Giants was a game that nobody really asked for, and that was when everybody was healthy. So this game isn't a sexy matchup, but it's a fun one from a DFS perspective.
Right.
And we'll get more into that one. And then Packers and Dolphins should be the most competitive. It's a really cold game. So then you got the Tua curse with the cold games, and you got to dissect that and see if you should invest in him because he's been playing lights out since he's returned. So it's a lot of fun, a lot of things to talk about, and I think we should just jump right into it.
Yeah, let me pull it up. I'll let you, though, go over point totals and everything.
Yeah, so let me pull that up real quick.
Looks like we got a really low-scoring game for Dallas.
Yeah, so Dallas is a 39 point total, which is very, very low. And again, on 3-game slates, usually you want to prioritize targeting the highest scoring games on the slates. Because the value is there in this game, you're not really going to be able to just completely fade or get away from it because all of them are reasonably priced, from running backs, receivers, even tight ends. And then Bears and Lions 48.5, and then Dolphins Packers at 47.5. But again, cold game. Could be lower scoring, more of a grinded out game than we'd expect. But both offenses have been riding pretty hot of late. So that one should be a fun one.
Yeah, maybe Dallas can get a win in their own stadium this time.
Yeah.
Still
over.
Yeah, there's so many memes we see because we're from Texas that are like, Texas A&M has won in Jerry World more than Dallas has this year and stuff like that. I think those are hilarious. But let's talk about the slate. Let's get into it. We're going to start with the Green Bay side of it. We were going to talk about Tua until we figured out that it is 28 degrees.
It should be 28 degrees. Shouldn't be a whole lot of wetness. But again, there's the stigma of Tua. Really, there's a huge gap between his non-cold stats versus cold stats.
Right.
So obviously, this is a game that adheres to his poor performances throughout his career so far. So if you want to just ignore that and pretend that this is, go for it. He actually has the slightly better matchup than Jordan Love. However, it's just the discretion is yours if you want to do that. We're going to be building multiple lines. It'll be tough to really get to or invest in either of these quarterbacks, but there is a lot of value from both sides on from the skill perspective.
Right. Let's start up with the Green Bay's guys, though. Jordan Love, he's been okay. Probably not the guy you expected when you invested in him early in the year. Few points here, few fantasy points here, but like 18.7 on average. Really, he does have upside, though, of 34, I guess. So,
I mean, really, a rushing touchdown against Chicago 2 weeks ago to go ahead is what has saved him from just being awful.
Yeah.
From a value perspective in recent weeks, because he's been in the upper 6s or 7K range, and obviously has not returned very solid value in really any game. Otherwise, and even in the game that he did do well, he had 1 touchdown, and I don't think it was a stackable because he had 17 pass attempts.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like a double would have worked out for you, even if you did play him that week. He just hasn't been playing great. It's a little bit of a slump. Hard to say sophomore slump because he did sit for a couple years before he did take the reins. But it is what it is. Even the receivers just have been up and down and really hard to target because you got Tucker Kraft going for no targets and then scoring the touchdown, but then not getting another target really after the late first quarter, I believe, was the second target. So he doesn't have the luster that he once had early in the season. So he's been touchdown or bust. Jaden Reed had a strong start and rapport with Jordan Love to start the year, but lately, where's the targets? Where's the usage? I don't understand in a sophomore year why he is not being used like he was last year. I mean, last year he was a great red zone threat, and he's had 1 touchdown in the last 5 games, just not really being used, and it's kind of frustrating if you have ownership of him in redraft leagues Christian Watson has just been awful.
Yeah.
He dropped a wide open touchdown last week, and then another deep ball, 0 for 3. That's just kind of one of the things you got to live and die by. But he was the guy last year I remember you calling out as like the last guy in that you had a gut feeling, and he was a huge part of why Green Bay went ahead of Chicago.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Detroit. So he's in the play. Like, it's a 3-game slate. None of these guys are really out of play. Dontavian Wicks, it is worth noting that Romeo Doubs did leave the game with a concussion on Sunday. Being a Thursday game, we don't expect him to play. And with that being said, when he did miss a game earlier this season due to suspension, Dontavian Wicks had the most snaps.
Mm-hmm.
He was the chalky guy that did not pan out because really it was a 2-touchdown Tucker Kraft game.
Right.
But he had 7 targets. They just weren't really successful connecting with him. But you can't ignore the snap count. And when it's that high and he's only 4,200, he can't be ignored.
Yeah, he's one of the value plays on this slate for sure, because there's not there's a lot of value, truly. A lot of 2 tight end builds, and we'll talk about that stuff. But at the same time, if you're going to look for a wide receiver value, he makes a lot of sense going into your lineups if you're going to get that. Then at the other quarterback spots, we're going to just go straight to the bottom. It's basically Jordan Love or Puke. There are some, of course, we should mention the fact that, Jared Goff is on this slate. Jared Goff has been good. If he has his boom game, he will, you'll have to have him in your lineup, but he hasn't done that consistently this year.
Yeah, and prime example was last week, because he's coming off a game where he had 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, and it was just like, damn, what are you going to do? And then follow up, we were like, well, we love Amon-Ra, but should we do a stack? Even whether it's a single or a double with Amon-Ra? We decided not to, and good thing we didn't, because he didn't score a touchdown. Both went to Jameer and then David Montgomery, and that was their only touchdown. So those kinds of games when it doesn't really not impact, but he's not involved on those scoring opportunities, it really hurts his value. And when he's the most expensive on the slate, he also has a banged up Amon-Ra St. Brown, who had his touchdown streak broken this past week. David Montgomery is banged up. So, but it's a really tough matchup for him.
The Bears are good at
Bears
football.
have been really, even throughout their losing streak, have struggled, or not struggled. They have done well against wide receiver ones and quarterbacks in general. Sam Darnold lit them up, but it was because of Jordan Addison and TJ Hockenson. They held Justin Jefferson to 2 receptions in an overtime game. That's just kind of one of those things when we're thinking about builds. There's a lot of mid-tier value everywhere, and it's just really easy to just do a balanced line compared to doing stars and scrubs, which you would have to do if you went with the Jared Goff route.
But the next guy we're going to talk about is Caleb Williams. Chicago side of it, Detroit hasn't been very good against running backs recently since we had Aiden Hutchinson go down. So we're going to kind of get off of that a little bit here and go towards the receivers. Which receiver do you want, though, is the question, because all of them have been either good or had multiple high target games, double-digit target games. It's hard to figure out where to go, because even Cole Kmet had 10 targets as last week.
It's really tough. Caleb Williams finally had a solid boom week. Had 340 passing yards against Minnesota, which was a good matchup. And so in good matchups, a lot of times this year, he has panned out and done well. He finally broke his touchdown list streak.
Yes.
But he still has not thrown a pick in 6 weeks, I believe. So he's actually playing under the radar pretty solid for the coaching and what he has to work with. But at the same time, we need to string together some consistency that he was starting to do at the, October portion of the season. So with that said, DJ Moore really stands out as his wide receiver 1. He caught all 7 targets, had 100 yards, touchdown last week. So he hit massive value. He was part of our puke stack double with Caleb Williams. The problem is we picked the wrong guy as the secondary option. Keenan Allen, all of a sudden, he had the targets, but Rome was starting to out-target him in consecutive weeks, so we went with Rome, plus saving a couple $100. Well, Keenan Allen says, F that, I'm going for 15 targets and a score just like I am able to do, and his price didn't jump, really. So, even Rome, he was the one that kind of struggled the most out of anybody, and he still had 10 targets, back-to-back games, 10 targets. So you can't really rule him out, even though he just was the, loser of the bunch, because he targeted DJ Moore. They couldn't hook up. They're 11 of their last 20 in terms of targets and completing them. Cole Kmet, can't ignore it. He's been frustrating because he's got 2 touchdown games on the board. He's got nearly 100-yard games on the board, but then he's also got 0 target games. He's also got, less than 4 targets and 4 straight leading up to this game, and then all of a sudden balloons for 10 targets. That's just one of these things that he's in the pool. Can you trust it? I'm not sure.
I've never seen a team try to lose as bad as Chicago. Like, they find a way to lose. We like talking about teams that like finding a way to win. They find a way to lose. This last game in overtime, lose to Minnesota on that. This game against Green Bay, get the kick blocked. Losing to New England.
Yeah, that was a very bad loss.
I mean,
not just being upset by New England, but the way that they did.
Right.
It was really bad. Arizona wasn't close from the start, and then the Hail Mary, obviously, against Washington. So it's been a really, really bad stretch since they came back to the States from their England or London game against the Jaguars, where they kind of handled them.
But I will say, they've played really well against NFC North teams in the way like where Caleb Williams is pushing the ball and stuff like that. Now, my biggest thing is game script wise. The reason I love Chicago this week is because of how the game script should go. They are minus 10.5 point dogs. Caleb Williams in those games they're willing to throw 45 times, and this guy can do some pretty cool things. I don't know if anybody was watching the game, but his scramble to the right, throw over DeAndre Swift's shoulder, pass. I know everybody, if you were watching any of the highlights, that play there's a reason he was the number 1 overall pick. Right. He's also one of the youngest players at the position in the whole league. It's just he can do it. You just got to get some coaching, and we got to get some better play calling. But we know that there's going to be guys with 10 targets, and you just have to figure out who you want to stack in this game.
And then for what it is worth, DeAndre Swift returning, revenge narrative, if you wanted to say that. I don't believe he played Detroit last year. So returning to Detroit for the first time since they traded him away during the draft in 2023.
Right.
He's kind of leveled off a little bit in recent weeks. He had a salvage with the touchdown against Green Bay on their not go ahead, but I believe to tie it up or to make it close. And he's been solid, but again, it's just kind of a direction where we're really focusing on the passing game matchup with him. And so if we think he'll have less than 20 opportunities, we probably want to go a different route because there's a lot more running backs on the board to spend up for or even down for.
Right, for sure. No, it's a really good running back slate. Talking about some of those guys, Rush does not have one of those running backs we're super excited about, Enrico Dowdle. We're not sure how good he is at football, but he will get the opportunities, which is always good. And then there's some really cheap receivers for Dallas that we probably I didn't even get them all. Who do you want on here, Luke, or do you want
No,
Jake?
Let's say Luke. Right now, Stephen Jones came out yesterday. We're recording this as a Tuesday morning, but Stephen Jones came out saying that Jake Ferguson was still in protocol and is a long shot to play. So I'm going to go with the impression on a short week that you are not going to play. Luke Schoonmaker, once again, we nailed him as a cheap tight end last week. He just has 50 yards every time he has the opportunity. He didn't have the targets against Washington that we thought he would, but he had the go-ahead touchdown later in the game and return massive value, minimum price getting 14.5. Love that. That helped us out a lot.
Well, his over too on Prize Picks was 26.5,
and it went down as we were recording the live stream.
Yeah, it didn't make any sense.
Hammer that. So Sam, if you're listening to this, you're welcome for that last call.
Yeah,
the last guy in. But yeah, I mean, this is pretty self-explanatory. It's Cooper Rush, who's actually done pretty well the last 2 games. He had 18 fantasy points, and then he followed up with a 20-point game this past week. So he's returned really good value, and he's still under 5,000. The Giants, not a bad matchup either. It might be one of the best matchups on the entire week or slate, at least. CeeDee Lamb hasn't scored, but he still had 12 targets back-to-back games with Cooper Rush at the helm and a rushing attempt. So he's getting massive, massive opportunity and volume, and his price stayed the same as it did on Sunday. So he's just a guy that we're really happy with. He did really well, had 100 yards and a touchdown against the Giants in their first game, and he was our captain, and that worked out as well. So, yeah.
The other thing, too, is if you look at the schedule on the left side there, guys, it's at San Francisco, at Atlanta, Philly, Houston, at Washington. those are tough games. And finally, they're going to get a game where, they get to play against the Giants, who have a much worse offense. They're going to, get on the field more often. It's going to be there's going to be more volume. We're going to see more guys getting involved, and he's the number one guy.
And the only time he had a dud was against the number one total defense in the NFL right now.
Right.
And it was an extremely negative game script. You want to be trailing, but you don't want to be trailing that bad.
But
and obviously, they couldn't move the ball. Cooper Rush, that game had 0.0 points. So, and he started and played most of the game. So, we like him a lot. And, any kind of double starts with him. I don't know how low owned Cooper Rush will be, but I bet you people will be more inclined to play the other quarterbacks on this slate. And we've seen time and time again, backup quarterbacks on Thanksgiving. There's just something about those guys. And it just kind of comes out. Don't remember the name top of my head, but there was a Detroit versus New England game a couple years ago where there was a backup quarterback came in and he had a 2-touchdown game. But, I mean, Dallas has had multiple games like that before where, Jason Garrett, if you want to go way back when, having a 3+ touchdown game against Green Bay, et cetera, and so on. So, backup quarterbacks can come to play and really tear up the slate. So I
never would have come up with this name. It's Sean Hill.
Yeah.
I never would have got that. That was the farthest thing from what I was thinking.
But then Detroit also had a couple other backup quarterbacks in recent years that have come on.
Right. John Hill threw 46 pass attempts in that game.
Yep. Fun stuff.
What I was going to say, though, is that you also get an opportunity to pick a cheap guy out of these 4 here. Kevontae Turpin I added because he had the touchdown on special teams. He has that opportunity.
Kick return touchdowns you'll ever see.
Yes. Jalen Tolbert, though, has been the number 2. Jonathan Mingo is the next guy up, and then Kevontae Turpin is last on the list. I don't wonder what was his snap counts for actual receiver
for Tolbert.
Yeah.
He had 97% of snaps last week, which is really solid for somebody 3,800. He only had 2 targets, caught a touchdown though. But Jonathan Mingo, he's had 1 target, didn't catch it in the 2 games that he's had with Dallas. And his snap count went down actually last week compared to going up. Usually, like you see people being implemented in. Really, he just kind of ate into Ryan Flournoy's snap counts. But even Jalen Brooks has 30% of the snaps. So basically, it's Jalen Tolbert and Lamb getting all the snaps, and everybody else just kind of
dart throws
by committee for the wide receiver 3-on-3 receiver sets. But Rico Dowdle back to 61% of the snaps. For what it's worth, he did score a touchdown and have a really solid value in the showdown against the Giants in the first game. Really, it's just a volume thing. Yeah, 13 points, pretty solid. But he's got a 19-point game in there. He's got a 21-point game. So when he gets 18-plus opportunities, and on top of that, most of these games, if you look week 6 through 11, trailing by 36. I mean, Atlanta, it was much worse than it appeared. Philly, down from the jump. Houston, down from the jump. But then one positive game script, all of a sudden 19 or 22 opportunities.
Yeah.
Had only 12 points, but all you got to do is have one touchdown be punched in. I think he might be one of the lowest on running backs. He is the cheapest starting running back. And it really opens up some value if you wanted to go that route. So I definitely think he's in the pool this week.
Yeah, absolutely. But that is all of the quarterbacks we're going to be talking about. There are obviously some other quarterbacks on the slate. Let me grab all of them. So we did talk about Tua a little bit, but it's a cold game. Jared Goff, we like the other type of game script, most likely rushing opportunities, and hopefully he doesn't score the touchdowns. Then you have to go all the way down to Tommy DeVito.
I mean, if you look at the opponent rank, this basically paints the picture of why we're going the direction we are. The top 3 quarterbacks, all bottom 7 matchups. Even Caleb Williams isn't the best matchup against quarterbacks, but receivers, they've been below average. But Cooper Rush and Tommy DeVito, the only positive matchups, and they're the only 2 under 5,000. So that's kind of why we're leaning in the direction of just cheap quarterback and stack and stuff like that. And even if you wanted to say Tommy DeVito, that exact, scenario or situation, well, Malik Neighbors is 71, very reasonable. And then Tyrone Tracy, starting running back. Same thing with Rico Dowdle, under 6,000, very reasonable. And then pick your Wandale or Darius Slayton, Theo Johnson. If he does play, he's had 6 targets in 3 straight games. He's 2,900 as a tight end. Super cheap. If you don't like any of those tight ends up top, his value there. Just there's avenues with a lot of these cheap guys to just build really, really solid balance lines that you'll be happy about.
Yeah, and I was going to say also Caleb Williams, Detroit has some injuries in their secondary, so that is another reason why we're more comfortable with him because they had, I believe, Carlson Davis and Terrion Arnold were out this last week. So
Yeah, let me
I'm
pull
not
up their
sure
depth
what
chart.
if they're going to be back this week or not, but I know that will help him even more. But yeah, let's talk about some running backs. Every running back is in play, damn near, because there's just some good ones, and then there's some just underpriced ones, in my opinion. So you look at the
Yeah.
top, you got the three top guys here. All three of them are definitely in play. You got HN, who's been wide receiver 2 for this team, except for last week, I guess,
Yeah,
because Waddle probably
his
played.
I guess targets have kind of leveled off. His receiving production hasn't been there, but guess what? He
Scored
scored two
2 touchdowns.
touchdowns receiving last week. So even though he didn't have the yards, he still had the points and back-to-back games with 20 points. That Rams game, again, one of the weirdest games we've seen, but that is the only dud on his entire game log this year, essentially.
With
Except
Tua.
for
With Tua.
yeah, with Tua, and then yeah, and then also he had a concussed in the first quarter game, and that's kind of like deflated his average. But at the end of the day, he's been one of the safest running backs in the entire fantasy football this year, outside of obviously the top two in Saquon and Derrick Henry, leading or at the top of the next tier of guys, and he's just been incredible. I guess Joe Mixon might be in that top 3 tier
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
Well, one thing I was gonna say was his snap counts came down in this game. He played less snaps later on in the game because they were up by so much. So that also hurts his volume. Of course, he only had 14 attempts in this last game, opportunities. Normally, in a game like this, he would have more, but they instead leaned on Raheem Mostert as the guy to run the ball because they don't want Achane getting hurt. Obviously, they want him healthy throughout the season. I'd expect if this game stays close, like most likely will, or if they're down, Achane will be on the field a ton. And so
Right.
he actually did have a season low in snaps, though.
Okay.
So
Yes. But again, we've talked about Green Bay before on elite running backs that they've given up a couple of
right,
boom weeks, but in negative game scripts, like for example, Christian McCaffrey, who is another chalky guy that they just got down way early and he just didn't return the value of being an $8,000+ running back. HN is kind of one of those things. If you think it's a close game, even if they're on the losing side of this game, there's a reason that he's 7,700, and there's a reason he still will probably be over 50% on the slate.
yeah. And then Jahmyr Gibbs. Okay, so before we do that, Dave Montgomery.
That's the true game time decision that you don't know, because he did say he will be ready, but I don't listen to players speak because they're never going to say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to miss some time," or "I'll probably
Right,
miss
for
this
sure.
week." It probably is smart to not have to play him because I don't think it's necessary with how well Jahmyr Gibbs has been playing, and they actually have some sneaky solid depth. I like Craig Reynolds
Right.
and Sione Vaki as depth pieces. So if he does sit, that just really vaults Jahmyr to the top of my priority list. But even if he does play, Jahmyr Gibbs is still in play. I mean, he still has been playing more and more snaps than David Montgomery in recent weeks. He had a 2-touchdown game this past week. He's basically scored 5 touchdowns in 5 games. The only problem is just he hasn't had the receiving volume that you would have thought he would have. But last week had a season high 67% of the snaps, and obviously a lot of that had to do with David Montgomery getting hurt later. But even before that, he's been essentially out snapping David Montgomery since week 8.
Yeah.
And basically he's going to be in the player pool no matter what, but he is a priority, especially if David Montgomery is out. The good news is that that's the first game on the slate. Thursday morning, when we do release our final lines, we will have that baked in whether or not David will be active.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll know for this game if they're playing or not. And then Josh Jacobs is on this board, of course, because he has been. I mean, he had 26 opportunities last week, 3 touchdowns, 31.6. He's just been like their workhorse, and it's the opposite of what he did in college, basically.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I mean, they brought him in to just completely be the consistent piece. Aaron Jones was always a scat back that seemed to just do well, but you hope when he lands, he doesn't stay down.
Right.
And he would always kind of get banged up and injured. And so they bring in Josh Jacobs, who's been just a brute, workhorse guy. And he's been actually battling through some limited practices the last few weeks, but that didn't matter last week. He had 3 touchdowns, 100+ yards, 4 of the last 5 games, over 20 fantasy points. And they are a home favorite. So he is a true 5-box running back this week. And 7,000 just seemed way too cheap. So
Yeah.
basically, all three of these guys up top, I expect all of them to have over 50% ownership. And it's just whether or not you want to go the direction of fitting all three, or going two and then a cheap running back, or double tight end, or four receivers, whatever you want to do. But all of these guys are in play. And if we're doing multiple lines, like I think we will be, we're going to have a lot of exposure to all three of those guys.
Absolutely. The last two guys are Tyron Tracy and Rico Dowdle, but we already talked about Rico Dowdle a little bit when we talked about Dallas. Tyron Tracy, on the other hand, I don't know if I'm confident in him with Tommy DeVito at quarterback because of the fact that, Tampa Bay blows them out. He doesn't get the opportunities that he's used to, but he did kind of end up doing okay at the end of the game because he did get the 4 receptions. Devin Singletary is the one that actually scored the touchdown, though, which took away from Tyron Tracy's production. So that was the biggest
It was
thing.
also his second straight game with a lost fumble. He's had 3 fumbles in the last 2 games, and I think that had a lot to do with why his snap share came below 50% for the first time since week 4. And but he was still above Devin Singletary. Devin Singletary did punch one in, but even the opportunities between Gray and Singletary, he doubled both of them combined.
Right.
So that is still encouraging in a blowout, but I don't expect this game to get that out of hand that early. But again, if it ends up happening, I wouldn't be shocked because Dallas is going to be the most popular defense on the slate. It just depends if you want a Giants piece. He might be my preferred option.
Yeah.
If I had to just do a standalone, price doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, it's really tough to invest in when there's so many running backs out top. That basically forces you to do a 3 running back build. And I'm not against that, but it's just something that just really limits you going forward if you do that.
Absolutely. And yes, Dallas is mispriced. If y'all haven't seen it yet, Dallas is at $3,100. And I think that's a misprice when they are going to be going against Tommy DeVito. Where do you want to start by build, though? Well, who do you want to start with?
We're going to do a Chicago build to start. I'm interested in letting you pick the reins and seeing what double we target because, again, I want to be overweight to all 3 of these guys.
Right.
But if we had to prioritize 2 in this first build, who are you going with?
Well, DJ Moore is my first pick for sure. He's the guy I put in because he has the upside of breaking it. He can create with the ball in his hands. After he catches the ball, he turns into a running back. He's really good at getting down the field, yards after catch. One of the best in the league, and that kind of deflates all the other stuff. If he doesn't have the targets, well, if he has the touchdown of 50 yards, it's okay,
Yeah, it is worth noting in his 2 games against Detroit last year, he had 7 for 96 in a score and then 6 for 68 in a score. So obviously that's a different quarterback, but similar situation and
a worse quarterback.
Yeah.
Well, I bet Tyson was in for both of those games. Right?
I think he was in for the first one. No, he was not. I remember stacking Justin Fields actually
in this game. Yeah, okay.
Because Chicago actually dropped one game that they should have won, and then they won the second game despite not playing well and ending up with a top pick. So either way, history lesson. He does have a good rapport, at least in his first 2 game sample size against the Lions, and their secondary hasn't really improved enough to warrant being hesitant about that.
Yeah. Give me Keenan Allen.
Oh, reliable.
I think so. I'm going to throw Dallas's defense in there because they're the best defense on the slate. I don't really know if you have a different lean.
No, I think there's one. If there's 100%er, if we're playing 5 lines like we do on main slates, there's 100%er. It's Dallas's defense just because the upside is there. They finally started to get to the quarterback a little bit last week, and then also 2 special teams touchdowns in the final 3 minutes.
It's crazy.
If you did start him,
it was a terrible touchdown at the end of the game, though.
Yeah, that was very stupid.
That was stupid.
But either way, playing against Tommy DeVito, that's a really bad matchup. They have the lowest total in the entire slate, I think, by a wide margin. So, I can't get with going Detroit defense. If you did maybe one time without any Chicago or a Chicago-esque build, I guess I can get behind that, but I just want to hammer Dallas.
Fair enough. Also, guys, just so y'all know, the reason this build is going to work out is because it allows you to get the guys you want at the running back position. If you do go with the higher priced quarterbacks, it kind of restricts you a little bit more. So we're going to save some money. And which running back do you have to have?
Well, first off, we're going to bring back my favorite bring back is Jahmyr Gibbs by far. Obviously, Amon-Ra St. Brown has been just as good. and he is the most expensive one. But one, he's a little banged up, and two, Chicago's been really good against wide receiver ones this year. Even through a 5-game losing streak, they're 5th against receivers, and even last week when Sam Darnold went off, it was Jordan Addison doing the damage. Justin Jefferson, once again, 2 receptions, which I don't remember the last time he had 2 receptions in a game. It might have been his rookie seasons,
if ever.
Exactly. So, Amon-Ra, he hasn't had the 12, 15 target game other than a couple times this year. So if he stays out of the end zone or stays below that 100-yard threshold, I think you can go other directions and have a better balanced build.
Yeah, ownership right now has him at 39%, and I'm off of that for sure. And then going to the next stack, would you like to go with Achane or Jacobs, or where would you want to go?
What a tough question.
It is.
I'm gonna say with this build, let's go with who are you picking to win this game? Miami and Green Bay.
Green Bay.
So then let's go with Josh Jacobs.
Okay. And then do you have a Miami?
I think CD is my favorite receiver up top this week.
It's going to be tough. Oh, no, we can do this. No, that's a lot of money.
There's a lot of value at tight end this week. Like I said, I think double tight end, because of the lack of value at receiver, other than Wicks, makes things work the way you want them to.
Right.
But really from here, I don't know which tight end is my favorite. I know that Luke Schoonmaker might be the best value, but at the same time, I'm also playing ownership game, right? And if I look at these ownerships, really there's a Tucker Kraft under 20%. There's a Sam Laporta under 20%, by far his season low. And I have a sneaky feeling that this might be a Sam Laporta game.
Okay. What about the Jonnu roster percentage? Let's talk about that for sure.
Yeah, Jonnu Smith has absolutely killed it in the last couple of weeks. He had a 100-yard, 2-touchdown game in week 11. And then last week, obviously 11 targets and another touchdown, back-to-back games with over 20 points. And his price didn't really jump at all. So basically his ownership, right now it says 26% on Roto. I don't believe that for a second. I think he's going to be north of 50% minimum. And because of the price, if he would have been over 5,000, people would have had to make a decision. Do you want to spend up or go down? But when basically all of these tight ends are within $900 of each other, and they're all in okay spots, or at least getting good volume. I mean, even I mentioned Theo Johnson being the one guy under 3,000, and he's gotten 3 straight games with 6 targets. He scored one of those games, and right now he would be the 3rd highest value on the slate. So, one of my stands I want to take this week is actually being underweight to Jonnu. But I don't want to fade him because of how cheap he is. But I think you can get underweight by having 2 out of 5 lines with him. And so with that said, in this first look, I actually want to avoid him and see what else we can do with the money that we save.
Interesting. I was going to say this would be the look this is more of a cash build in my personal, or not more of a cash build. Sorry. This is more of a tournament-ish build. I don't know that Caleb Williams is actually one of the lower quarterbacks on the percentage. Mm-hmm. He's under 10%. Jordan Love is at 45%. So we're not, if we go away from Jordan Love, you're automatically going to be a tournament build apparently.
And again, I don't know how much we can take into account these ownerships, because I don't see a scenario where Tommy DeVito is 8x the ownership of Cooper Rush. Right. And so even if it's not Cooper Rush and it's Trey Lance, same thing.
Yeah, I'm playing
much rather have Lance than a Tommy DeVito. And if I'm the one saying that, I bet you a lot of other people are as well. So I expect at minimum it being the same. But Cooper Rush should be the higher own of the two. And if not, then we're just going to be banking and swimming in cruddy Dallas money.
Yeah. But I'm down to figure out where to go. Is there a guy you want to get to? We don't have.
If we have Schoon in there, that leaves about 57, I think.
Yeah, which would be Jaden Reed, which makes me happy.
That would be a Rico. That would be a Jalen.
Could just triple stack Chicago and then go up to Miami here with Achane. That would be crazy. Yeah, I'm not against Jaden Reed. I like Jaden Reed a lot here.
Okay.
Because he is the number 1 receiver in my opinion, and Romeo Doubs is out, and so possible. What about if we went a different direction at tight end? Is there other guy?
Sam Laporta is. I have Sam Laporta vibes for some reason this week.
What if we went down though? To
all the way down to Theo? I don't know if that opens up anything that you're happy about. I mean, Jameson. You can do a Jameson.
Okay.
Sure.
double bring back in that game and just expect it to be the highest scoring game on the week like it is.
Right. It's tough.
Could do that. You could also. There's a lot of options at this point, but I think the best option is what we did here with Schoonamaker and going Schoon and
Jaden
Reed. Thank you. So I think that's the best option.
Nice.
Sam Laporta in. Who do you get? Anybody that's worth it?
About 5,000.
Right.
I
Triple
think in my immediate first look, I had the last guy in being whether you want Jonnu or Dontavian Wicks as a value, and then just leaving $800 on top of having a tournament-ish build. I think it'll be a really good way to not be duped. That was kind of one of the ideas I had, because I had the same exact 8, and I was just like, who's that last guy in? And so it was between one of those two. One's 43 and one's 42.
Yeah.
Very reasonable. I think they're both solid values, but again, $700-800. I think it is going to be a tough time to not be duped heavily.
Well, I think also if you wanted to, you could go Dontavian Wicks here and then go up to HN, which would give you the. So right now, if you look, Jonnu is from Miami. You have Josh Jacobs from Green Bay, so you get that correlation. If you flipped it, you could just go down to Dontavian Wicks at 4,200
and put up to HN
and go up to HN, and then have the similar correlation. But it's definitely, there's a lot of really fun stuff to do, but I think that most of our builds are going to look like this, where we get Caleb Williams, 2 receivers, whoever you might want, and then Jahmyr Gibbs, and then start from there. Top running back, Dallas's defense. It's going to be very similar to what we want to do every time. So
I want to do one quick fun build to see if it can work.
Which
I want to go
quarterback?
Cooper Rush. That's my quarterback.
Okay.
And we're going to double it with CD and Luke Schoonmaker.
Okay. So similar to what we did. We're going to have a very similar build in almost
Dallas
all of these.
D, obviously, 31.
Do you want to bring back?
I want to put, at the very moment, no. I want to put all 3 top running backs in there.
Okay.
And see if that can work.
Why not, right?
There's 46 left.
Yeah, that's probably fine.
If you wanted to, that's enough for a Wicks and a Rome.
Oh, yeah, we could go, well, yeah, that's probably the best option.
Or if you didn't trust that, then you can go to Jalen Tolbert, who we said just had 98% of the snaps, and then that's enough for Keenan.
Yeah. So we're triple stacking Dallas.
Yeah. And then if you didn't love that, then obviously you can get off Schoon, get up to, I believe that's enough for both Kraft and Cole Kmet as options.
What about doing a bring back, because you didn't want one originally? Let's try this guy.
Okay.
9,700.
That's enough for DJ Moore and
Yes. Oh, is it? I think it's one short.
Don't lie to me.
Yeah. It's 100 short. Well, very close though. But we could. Oh well, what about Jalen Tolbert? We should double stack this.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I definitely should.
Let's put Jalen Tolbert in there, and then 5,900 is DJ Moore.
Perfect.
So there's a lot of ways to build these lines. This is a triple running back line, which I really like, and you get CD.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if I want to do that for every line, but if we're doing 5 lines, I want to do one line where we have all 3, and that's a way to get over the field on all 3. Because I think I want to have at least 60% exposure to the top 3 running backs, but I also want to have some sprinkles of a Rico or Tyrone Tracy, because they're all going to be low owned, and at very minimum, I think with 1 out of 5 lines, you can be even or slightly over the field with either of those guys, because everybody's going to flock to these top 3.
I think the problem is you just don't have. You would have to leave money on the table if you did that, because of the fact that there aren't receivers I want to get. I don't want Amon-Ra in a situation against Jalen Johnson where I expect it to be a running game heavy. I don't want Malik Neighbors against Dallas, where I expect Tommy DeVito to suck like normal. I don't know that I want Tyreek Hill in the freaking freezing cold against Green Bay. It's really hard to say I want any of those guys up there other than CeeDee Lamb. And then looking at the rest of the slate, it's like now you're at 6,100, and you don't have have to try to find a way.
What makes it fun about it is that I think we're both kind of in a similar boat of there's a decent amount of stands we're already taking. And they're on the same guys, which is fun, because I think a lot of those guys, we talked about Amon-Ra being the highest owned receiver, or Tyreek Hill is going to still have some ownership. I mean, he was one of the chalkiest receivers this past week, and we didn't really understand it because it wasn't a great, matchup against New England, and he still was, north of 15%.
Exactly.
So those guys are still going to grab some ownership, and so we're already taking stands off those guys. And then if we did another stand of by far the chalkiest tight end, that's, I think, an easy way to just already be different. And then on top of that, we're going the cheap quarterbacks, not Jordan Love at 45%. Again, Tommy DeVito, no chance he gets 25% ownership.
No way.
But Tua, I think Tua and Jordan Love at the very least are going to combine for over 50% from the quarterback exposure. And if we have 0% of both of those, another huge differentiation with our builds.
For sure. Now, one thing I will say, we'll ask is who scares you the most on this slate?
In a to invest in or
Again,
not getting enough of?
Yeah, not getting enough of.
Malik Neighbors.
Okay. I was wondering.
And it's because if you looked at the last game, and I did say that the CD Lamb captain worked out against Dallas or against the Giants in the first game, he slowly just kept getting peppered with targets and then had another 15 target game. And then that was the game that he got concussed, but he still, was the highest scoring guy on the entire slate. Last week, he didn't have a single target in the first half and then had 9 in the second half and ends up having a pedestrian 12 points. But even in spite of that, he's still averaging over 10 targets each of the last 4 games. He's 7,100. I think he'll probably be the lowest owned of all of these receivers above 7,000. And with that being said, if that's the case and he's 24% owned, and I don't know if I can get to 2 lines with him, and if that's the case, we're going to be under the field to him, and he still is capable of breaking out. Because, again, remember, Trayvon Diggs missed this past week. No indication whether or not he will play this week, but if he doesn't, that's a massive loss, and that just helps him out even more.
Yeah, it should be a very fun. That game is like we talk about sicko games for college football. That is like feels like a sicko game for sure.
Right.
Where it's just like 2 bad teams going at it, and hopefully one of them.
If I just set it on paper and it was a 47.5 total, a 48.5 total, and 39.5 total, and I told you my favorite game was the 39.5 total, you're just like, well, we're not going to build the same lines then.
Right.
But at the end of the day, that's just kind of where I'm really flocking to with a lot of this value on, especially the Dallas side. But I mean, you can't ignore the Giants having the value at tight end. They're the cheapest starting tight end, second cheapest starting running back, and then wide receiver 1 wise, 7,100 from Neighbors is very reasonable. Obviously, Wandale and Darius Slayton, nobody's really going to be flocking to them. If I filter to their ownership real quick, it says Wandale 17%. Not terrible ownership, but that's not a lot for a 3-gamer. And then Darius Slayton less than 5%. So because he just had a 0 catch game.
Yeah.
So essentially, nobody's on the Giants this week. Obviously, they're the biggest, lowest total.
So
I agree, but
tournament plays,
they're all tournament plays.
They're all exactly. If you throw one of them in your line, say you're like, well, I'd rather get Wandale at 4,900 than I want to go Rome as my last guy in. Like, that's not gonna hurt you if Wandale is the guy that gets peppered. We talked about this last week. Tommy DeVito doesn't have a favorite receiver yet, so it could be any of these guys. I expect it to be Malik, but at the same time, it might be a different guy. Theo Johnson's also interesting at 2,900, as we talked about, because he is so cheap, and he could get 6 targets, which wouldn't surprise you.
He is also the lowest owned starting tight end. Obviously, Luke Schoonmaker is showing no ownership, but basically he's going to have the 20% that Jake Ferguson is showing.
Yeah.
Should he be starting and playing? And even if we're talking, assuming Jake Ferguson is out, if he's in because of a concussion, there's no limitations, and every single thing that we said applies to Jake Ferguson because he's only 3,900. And I'm sure because of this slate, we can find $500 extra to still have lines we're happy with a double with Jake Ferguson.
Right. Exactly. So here's Theo Johnson, though. 6 targets in the last 3 games. I mean, if he's just getting you a baseline and if he scores a touchdown, you can get this 14 points at 2,900. You're pretty happy. But let's get out of here. We have, some other stuff coming out, though, this week. We're going to be talking about the Friday slate. We're going to be doing the showdown slate between the Raiders and the Kansas City Chiefs, which is a -10 game, and it's really sad. And Gardner's out and all this fun stuff. But so we'll be talking about that slate. We'll also be talking about main slate, which is a 10-game slate on Sunday. And then we have some other announcements. We're going to try to keep talking about this as much as possible so y'all can hear about it. But we're going to be doing a college football bowl pick'em contest where the winner of the contest will get a $25 gift card from the NFL shop that we will send out. That contest will be put in our Discord, and of course we'll be posting it everywhere. We're going to start posting it on Instagram, Twitter, and whatever else. I guess I'll post it on YouTube also if you haven't seen it yet. And so we'll have that out for everybody to see. What else are we doing? There's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, NFL game.
Yeah.
And on top of that, next week is championship week for college football. So this week, rivalry week. Notably, Texas A&M rivalry is renewed. That is the most expensive ticket all time for a college football game. And so that's a lot of excitement, especially for locally because we are in the Austin area. So a lot of buzz all week for that game. And then, but yeah, conference championship week next week. Then we have the playoff figured out and determined. And then obviously,
Oh yeah, that's what I forgot.
Yeah, all that. We have power rankings next week. We have we're actually going to put up 2 props videos this week. I'm going to do a designated, favorite props of the Thanksgiving only slate.
Right.
Remember, there is a free square for Tyreek Hill on Prize Picks this week, and then also Underdog is going to be doing discounts all week as well for Thanksgiving. So is Prize Picks outside of the free square. So keep an eye out on those things. We'll have another favorite props of the week for the Sunday slate. A lot of fun stuff.
Yeah, and then the week of December 8th, I don't remember if that's the Monday or not, but that week we are going to be doing our Bowl Pick'em video special. So that'll be me, Cam, and Dustin all together working on the bowls for the college football slate. And we're going to pick every bowl. We're going to talk about our favorite players in those bowls, prospects, anything that we think is going to happen. That video is going to be way too long. But what we're going to do is I think we might do it live. I haven't decided how we're going to do it yet. It's just going to be a lot of fun. That video is going to just be very ad lib off the rip and very, very fun to do. So I'm excited about that one. And yeah, but otherwise, we will see y'all tomorrow.
Check out. There's also a Black Friday game this week. So we're going to be doing a showdown only slate on that. There's going to be a main slate that we'll be talking about. A lot of fun as well.
And a live stream.
Don't forget about that. Oh, yeah.
So
every Sunday morning.
Yep. We'll see y'all next time.